Hello my friends, so here we are, chapter 18 of A Look in the Dark. And you remember the situation at the first part of chapter 18, which is called 2 p.m. because that was the time they all met up with the various officials. And Danny Green is with Inspector Hutchins, and Danny Green has left. Hutchins has appointed a detective sergeant to follow him. And he's described how he was dressed. He says, right Bennett, quick as a flash, follow that young client who just left my office. I want to know who he is, where he lives and who his friends are. Just routine, but keep it to yourself. Quickly, man, or he'll be away. Grey jacket, jeans, desert boots. Bennett moved along the corridor quickly and followed his normal route to the main exit of New Scotland Yard, but couldn't see who he was supposed to be tailing. He re-entered the building, and a young woman police officer was giving a young man directions to the door. The young man was wearing a grey jacket, jeans and a pair of desert boots. When Danny Green got into the tube at Westminster, he didn't know that the man 3 seats behind him had followed him from the police building. The very idea never even crossed Danny's mind. He was on something of a high and hardly noticed who else was in the train. In his head he was going back over it all and enjoying the way it had all led to this visit to the New Scotland Yard. On Paddington Station, Ricky was getting impatient. He had been very impressed with Brentland. He thought he was a decent chap all round, more concerned about the people's interest than in the bank interest. Sipping his third whisky, he waited, but the newspaper he'd purchased was still rolled up in his pocket. He was in no mood for reading, and his impatience was growing because he wanted to see Danny Green and then the others so they could all know how things had gone with the other officials. When Danny arrived, it seemed half the population of London arrived with him, yet even so there was something about the chap hovering outside the door of the bar. Danny, old boy, do you recognise that young chap out there by the door? Yes, I know there are dozens of them, but I mean the one with the bright red and black tie. Yeah, I do. I'm sure he was coming in the door of New Scotland Yard as I was going out. Do you think he's been following me? Yes, I do, and I'm sure he was coming in the... yes, I do think he probably is, Danny. Follow me quickly now. Before Danny knew it, they were jumping on a train bound for the west of England. Ricky watched as the young detective sergeant Bennett boarded the train 2 carriages back. He waited for the train to start moving and then whispered to Danny to move when he did. The 2 men got up and headed for the door, pushing through the crowded train. To Danny Green's amazement, his aristocratic friend opened the door and shouted, "Jump!" As the 2 men landed on the platform, a railway man asked him if they were stupid. Ricky gave him a smile and mumbled something about having got on the wrong train. The anxious face at the window of the train, now as red as the tie beneath it, confirmed Ricky's suspicion that the young man had followed Danny from the interview at New Scotland Yard. Danny, who had slipped as he landed, picked himself up and demanded to know what Ricky was playing at, and Ricky explained that it was learned from his Penelope. It's an old trick, dear boy. She called it shunting. I know it was rather rude pushing through all those commuters, but... Rude? You nearly created a bow wave on that train. They nearly killed us. I know, old boy, but we don't want your police inspector following us and finding out who we are, do we? That young detective is going to look pretty stupid, and he can't get off that train until Reading now, unless he calls for an emergency stop, and unless you've just managed to rob the Bank of England or the inspector's cufflinks, he'll hardly be doing that. So what do we do now? We get across to Waterloo and go to Salisbury, and we take a completely different route home. It was 3 hours, all but a few minutes, when Bennett returned to the office of Inspector Hutchins. He'd been working with him for a while and he really liked him, but he was not sure how the inspector would react to his failure. Sorry, sir, he mumbled. He met up with some other geezer at Paddington, and they must have tumbled me. I followed them onto the train, but when I realised they jumped off again, it was moving too fast and I just lost them. And then I had to stay on the train all the way to Reading. That's okay, Bennett. I'm not surprised at all. They're clever. I appreciate an officer who's sensible enough not to risk his life foolishly jumping off a moving train. Can you work late tonight by any chance? What that young man has put in our hands is amazing, and I want us to go through it together before we involve anyone else. Okay, sir, not a problem. I'll just phone, though. Yes, and when you phone Judy, will you give Mrs. Hutchins a ring for me? Hutchins took his glasses off and folded them neatly on the desk. "This is truly amazing, Bennett. And when we hand it all over to the Wildlife Crime Unit, I'm going to tell them. You and I must be in on the part of the operation that results in so-called Major Stanhurst, remember him, being put behind bars for a good while after my retirement. So what do you think of that, Jamie, eh?" By 10:30, all of the 4 contented investigators were back at the home of the Greens and comparing notes. Sue reported that the RSPB man had taken her seriously after the frosty start, and she was certain that he would be reading everything over again and then passing it to whoever would act on it. Carol felt similarly about Cantwell, the customs man. She felt sure that he would see there were fireworks and was very pleased at her contact with this concerned and pleasant man. Danny in turn explained the details of the meeting with the police officer, Chief Inspector Royston Hutchins. Danny described him as a likeable but somewhat persistent man and related the events that followed, including Ricky spotting the man following him and the jump from the train. Ricky delighted in telling them it was a trick Penny had taught him when one of her bosses considered him unsuitable company for her and had them followed. Penny called it shunting. Ricky smiled. Nice that she came to our rescue in a way today. She'd been in his thoughts all day. Nice thought, Ricky. But Anne, do you think we should maybe phone and check it was one of the police inspector's men? No, Carol, when Ricky pointed out I'd seen him earlier and he was in New Scotland Yard. However, I did tell the inspector that we'd ring him. He would like us to give them 2 months, not 2 weeks before we go to the media. He says 2 weeks is not enough for international organisation. I think he's maybe got a point, but I wouldn't agree until we all discussed it. How do you feel? Sue nodded. Carol agreed, and Ricky said, "No problem, old boy, but you shouldn't phone him from here." No, you're right, Rick. We could do with someone phoning from a call box a long way from here. What about Paul? No, Dan. Carol frowned. He would not want to phone the police. People where he lives don't do that. I could ask my sister in Leeds. No, Carol, she might say to Dave. Danny didn't want to involve more people. Didn't want more people to know than necessity dictated. Aye, Dan, you're right. Anna's only one real fault. She never could keep a secret, and she would be sure to tell Dave. The less he knows, the better. My dad would do it. And if I asked him to ask no questions, not tell even Mum, and phone from a public call box, he would do it. I've always trusted him completely. Sue parried the answer, and they all agreed. That will confuse them somewhat, dear girl. Ricky smiled at Sue. How did you ever live up there in that awful city? I was relieved to get out of it. Sue had a cheeky grin. The big city is where it all happens, Uncle Ricky. Carol was as pleased as Ricky that the youngest member of the Ace Alliance was not afraid to stand up to the aristocrat. Watch your Uncle Rick. Never offend a Londoner. Look what they did to Charles I. Sue grinned. Blow Charles I. I want to know about my dad's favourite MP. David Brentland. Aha. Well, dear girl, your father is a sound man to follow. David Brentland is a thoroughly decent chap. One wonders what he's doing in Westminster at all, really. The other 3 were not sure if that was a joke or if it was really the way Ricky felt. He was totally absorbed in the story and is most determined that everything must be done properly. He's going to sit on the information for a couple of weeks, or if we now tell him so, a couple of months. And then he's going to start asking the Home Secretary what is happening. He says if we're not happy with the results, we're to contact him, and he will stir things up right there in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. He made some rather strong comments about the hunting, trapping and shooting community, and I was quite glad that he didn't know about my connections. He said something I thought was very true. A country that doesn't care for its wildlife as it should won't care for its people properly either. He completely understood our need for anonymity, quickly grasped our motives. I have his office and his private phone number, and he said he would be available now or at any time in the future whenever we needed him. He's on our side, playing in the same rugger team, if you know what I mean. Carol listened contentedly. Here was this dear middle-aged aristocrat mixing it up with a working-class writer, an Ulster Protestant rebel, a sincere Cockney girl with strong emotional feelings about things, and now we're one of the most independently minded left-wing politicians in Britain. Why? Carol knew it was because they all wanted to change things for the better. She didn't understand the rules of rugby, but she was glad to be in this particular team. Well, I think we've done all we can for now. Danny looked at the faces of his 3 co-investigators, and they seemed to agree. We best get on with the next part of the rest of our lives, don't you think? Danny was thinking about his writing, and Ricky had some business to see to, and Carol had neglected the flower beds for weeks. Sue was the only one unsure what she did next. Ricky Claymore caught her mood and said, "Well, Sue, you're on full pay for 2 weeks of vacation. For work beyond the necessary." "No, girl, don't protest. Go home to those parents of yours and relax." "I will, Uncle Ricky, but I don't need to be paid for doing nothing." "Ah, but you do, girl. You do. Never argue with the boss when he's looking after you. I want you to go home and make sure your parents know all is well, and then I'm going to make a trip down and take you and them out for a meal. Then we will discuss your continued employment with me, as long as working with me is suitable for you." "I'd love to work for you." Sue looked round the room. "I want to be close to you, Tree, for the rest of my life, if you'll have me." "Tell your parents that I am going to take them and you to the Dorchester for a meal. You can get away with smart casual there. Be sure and tell them it's appreciation for the work you've shared in. And as for you 2 lovebirds, you're going to eat out at the best restaurant you can find and put it on the expense account. And you can stop protesting too." Who's the financial partner here? The Ace of Diamonds? Is it not me? The next morning, Danny and Carol lay in bed, cuddled up to each other, as the Starlings and the Magpies battled for Best Noise Award somewhere. "What are you thinking, oh Lord and Master?" Carol asked with a cheeky grin, sparkling eyes, and a dig in her Lord and Master's ribs. "I was just thinking how odd life is. At the start of the spring I was Danny at the Motor Factors, and now I'm a right around—" "Yes, you're a member of the Ace Alliance." "Oh, I'm married to a regular genius of a man. And no doubt there are plenty of girls who would like to be laying where I am now, right now, and me just a poor farmer's daughter from Ireland, and me living in your shadow." "If you left the Ulster sarcasm out of your voice, sweet lass, I might be impressed by your false flattery." He ran his fingers through her hair. "Nonetheless, I will tell you this. Live in my shadow you never will, Carol Green. As I am, so you are. I don't care about the battle of the sexes, but there is no battle here. You're my equal and more, and I love you with a depth that the English language fails me in expressing. Do you recall the incredible beauty of the sunset on the Tyrone border bogland? Can you see it? Do you feel it as I do when we watch a buzzard soar into the blue sky? How did you feel when we sat up half the night last July and watched that amazing lightning as it lit up the hills? All of these things express my love for you better than words ever could." Carol closed her green eyes and kissed her husband with the tenderest of passion, opened her eyes again and said, "I know, Danny boy, because I too have great difficulty declaring how I feel in nouns, verbs and adjectives. It's the strength of my love I want you to appreciate. Take it from me, it's as immovable as the Mourne Mountains, as persistent as the waves on the North Cornish coast, aye, and as deep as a black hole. It really is beyond human understanding. But if you love me, Danny Green, it was a fine way you chose to spend the summer, so it was." Sir Richard Claymore was now back in his Weymouth home, alone with his thoughts, and reliving his Royal Enfield motorcycle mission to track down the Southampton customs officer. As he poured his morning earlier than usual tipple of generous quantity into the glass, he felt fairly contented. Single malt whisky of some years in his hand, and the voice of Nina Simone filling the room from his sound system. He thought that Penny would be more pleased with the new attitude he had, fighting back by doing something positive rather than just fighting out of contempt, but fighting like a cornered, unreasoning animal. She'd be pleased to see some of his unearned fortune being put to work for the benefit of the planet Earth. Looking out across Weymouth Bay towards St Albans Head, he watched the sunshine breaking through the cloud and wondered that for far too long he had allowed the darkness of the past to completely engulf him. Sue sat at her parents' breakfast table and was still overwhelmed with the joy of her parents when she arrived. She was glad she'd surprised them by coming on an early train. Her father was like he used to be, warm and affectionate, and to such a degree that she could barely resist climbing in on his lap for a cuddle as she did when she was a tiny girl. By the way, Sue said with a new authority her parents were going to have to get used to, next weekend we're all going out for a meal. We are? Dad was interested. Yes. She paused, took a deep breath and said, and we're going to the Dorchester. It's a celebration. Bill Parry looked at his wife. You must be joking. No, I'm not joking. We're meeting Sir Richard Claymore. I'm not sure what his proper title is, and he plays all that down. Don't look so worried, Mum. He's not my boyfriend or anything. He's a very good friend, but more like an uncle than anything else. It's to celebrate a very successful job in which he and I partnered the Greens. Sue laughed. Her father paused, choosing his words carefully. Did this have something to do with the phone call you got me to make from a call box to the police inspector? Yes, that was a great help, Dad. What phone call? Mrs. Parry knew nothing about it. Nothing that matters, Mum. Anyway, Ricky, Sir Richard wants to treat us all to a meal as a way of... What was it he said? Oh yes, commemorating our success. Why the Dorchester? We never go anywhere like that. Too expensive for the like of us, Sue. It was Sue's mother that said it, but her father was nodding his agreement. Listen, Mum and Dad. I have started an amazing new chapter in my life. And what we four have accomplished is going to please you no end when it becomes public. You must never implicate us in it, though. But I'll tell you this. It is worth an extravagant celebration, and Ricky says it's on his expenses, and he wants to treat us. He wants to treat you. Oh, Ricky, is it? Yes, David. Yes, Dad. Karen and I call him Uncle Ricky. He's your age, not mine. I've become very close to the Greens and to Ricky too. Bit of a toff, is he? Left-wing Bill Parry was not impressed by titles. Yes, he is. He went to Eton, in fact. Did he now? One of the overprivileged trying to keep the workers in their place, I suppose. Oh, Bill, don't start all this as soon as Sue's home. Bill, please. It's okay, Mum. Honestly, I thought that until I met him. But he's not a bit like that. In fact, he's a lovely, caring man with a heart of pure gold. And I know that when you get to know him, you're going to love him like I do. Why should I love one of the ruling classes? First, because he's one of the most genuine people I've ever met, Dad. So are Danny and Carol. Second, he hates the establishment even more than you do. In fact, I think you and him might be a very dangerous combination. I doubt that. I can't put on any airs and graces to please anybody. Dad, I don't put on any airs and graces to please anybody. And Ricky loves jazz too. Does he? He can't be all bad then. Bill Parry thought he might enjoy being wined and dined by this strange member of the elite, but he spent the whole week worrying about it. So that's the end of chapter 18. So what we've got is the investigation now handed over to the authorities. A police officer, high-ranking, skillful, soon to retire, who wants to know who the Ace Alliance is. We've got Sue trying to help her parents see that people aren't all bad just because they speak with a posh accent. We don't know where the investigation's ending up. What's become of Stanhurst? Lots of loose ends to tie up here, isn't there? And future episodes, hopefully, will do that. Nice to share with you, my friends. Thank you for your continued listening. I hope this isn't proving to be an endurance test. I appreciate your considering this story through to the end. Lots of love and wishes for peace and contentment to you. Bye for now. Bye-bye.